Today, I'll be talking with Jake Sussman. Jake is the founder and chief empowerment officer at Superpower Consulting. It's a mentoring firm that empowers LD students across the globe to confidently and successfully excel in the traditional learning environment through self-advocacy. Today, we'll be talking to Jake about how he went from a struggling student to being a college graduate whose life's work is now mentoring struggling students. So Jake, welcome, and thanks for joining me today.
Don, thank you so much for that introduction. I'm so happy to be here.
So Jake, you've described your early school years as feeling inadequate, angry, and anxiety-ridden. Would you tell us a little bit about that and what turned things around for you?
You know, Don, that's a really good question. And it's something that many of the folks watching may actually relate to with your children, is that, frankly, going back really when I was in third grade, all of these little differences started to show, from independent reading time, where I would become the behavioral problem. I was constantly kicked out of class, and I was just confused because all I wanted to do was to fit in with everyone else, but I kept getting in trouble and I didn't understand why. And it's funny, it was about 2 years ago, I found my report card in third grade, and it was this 2-paragraph analysis of my year, and 8 of those sentences talked about my behavioral problem. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, wait a minute, why am I misbehaving during independent reading time versus when I'm doing group projects? Oh, I'm an auditory learner. If only the school at that time were able to put headphones in my ears, maybe that whole experience would be different. So in reality, what happened as a young kid was that I was filled with fear, anxiety, and stress throughout from third grade into sixth grade, when I hit the lowest of low. And at that point, I was completely turned off from learning. So then how do you expect someone to want to learn, be open to learning in the first place when that happens?
Very good. Now, you mentioned that when I talked to you earlier that your parents took charge of things when you were in the sixth grade. They didn't leave you in that learning environment, but they put you in another learning environment that really helped you to advance. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Look, I want, if we can go back in time during that moment, because this was the lowest of low. I was, again, like I said earlier, I was filled with anxiety and stress. I wasn't sleeping at night. I became paranoid. I was afraid to walk into class. I was told to read out loud in class in third grade. In sixth grade, when I was 3 grade levels behind in reading, and yet I'm being forced to read out loud in class. It was humiliating. Okay, so my parents their number one priority in this case was my well-being. I was not in a good place, so they pulled me out. They pulled me out with no plan. They didn't care about what anyone else had to say, and they just needed me to be happy, be safe, to feel safe. So during this process, Don, I was kind of confused what was going on, but at this point, I didn't personally find, my parents found the Southport School, which is a school in Connecticut, which is for children for high functioning learning and attention challenges. And there's multiple foundations that needed to be established before I could grow, okay? My social foundation, social emotional foundation, and my academic foundation, okay? So the academic foundation couldn't happen without the social emotional foundation first, because again, this is motivation to want to learn. Okay, so I had family at this Jewish day school in Connecticut, and it was really because I had family there that was a safe place. And from there, that really helped my social emotional confidence. And at that point, I knew I didn't really want to become, let's say, a rabbi, right? I wanted to go to college, and I told my dad in the car, because we would drive 30 minutes to school. This was in sixth grade when my parents pulled me out, right? I repeated a year at that school. And that's when we realized that I was ready to go to the Southport School, which was formerly called Eagle Hill. And that's when I was ready to start to build my academic confidence. And as a student, again, you don't really think about it when you're in it, but reflecting back, it's really fascinating because I had this teacher, there was this group that I would sit down with at the Southport School. And at this point, Don, I still was insecure socially. So I would stutter on words. I wouldn't complete my sentences. And I was sitting around this group, and I share this all the time where we had to like share what were we doing. We were talking about where we're going to go in the summertime, and everyone had to go. And at this point, I'm freaking out because I knew that I was going to stutter on my words. So I was getting really nervous. And at the point when it was my turn, I started to share what I was doing, and I started to stutter. And for the first time, I'll never believe what happened. This girl next to me filled in my sentence. And then the kid next to her filled in my next sentence. And that was a big realization for me that I was in the right place, of where I was surrounded by people, by peers that actually understood what I was experiencing instead of just making fun of me for not, finishing my sentences. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's wonderful that your parents were able to take control and put you in an environment that addressed the social and emotional support you need and help you then to develop that desire to succeed academically. Now, there are a lot of parents that are not in a position to do that today. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where your mentoring group comes in.
Right.
So would you describe a little bit about how this mentoring works and how that can help children that can't be taken out of their current classroom environment?
Right. Absolutely. And that's something that it's really important to talk about, because there's a lot of programs out there that are really expensive. And for our folks that, may not be able to have the means to maybe send your kid to whatever institution that's best for them, there's other ways that we can do this. And actually, there's a few. I'll talk about mentorship in general, and then I'll talk about what we're doing, because it's mentoring, is one of those types of relationships that you're not here to fix. You see, all of my life, I felt that I was broken. I had 7 different professionals I was working with. I was like, what's wrong with me? And imagine I'm the oldest in my family, and I'm like, gosh, I wish there was someone that was my age that I can relate to. And that is really the key piece, because mentoring is really good for building a relationship. But what we're going to focus on is self-advocacy, because you can invest in all these programs, in all the reading programs in the world, in all the private schools, and all the tutors and all the therapists and all the things. But if your kids don't have those tools to then take their newfound skills and then communicate it to someone who may not understand them, like a teacher or a peer or a family member, those strategies become really hard to be retained. And I'm only saying that because I came from private school and middle school for high functioning learning differences, and then I went to a high school for kids with high functioning learning differences. And frankly, it was really interesting because a lot of my peers that have graduated, they still find it challenging of the same things that they were coming into the school with. They're still dealing with them today. So the question is, what can we take away from these programs? And at the end of the day, it's communication. And on top of that, though, 30% of U.S. college freshmen drop out of school. 30%. That's an unbelievable number. And I'm reflecting this, and I'm like, how is this possible? Like, how come all these students are dropping out? What are we missing in school? And I'm going back to this idea that we need to empower our students on how to communicate. You don't really need, it's not expensive to change what comes out of your mouth. The difference between saying, I'm great and I'm okay is significant. To ask a student, how are you doing today? What's something that you love? What gets you excited? These are all little strategies that can tap into someone else's world. And that's what we're doing at Superpower Consulting. And this is where I'll kind of get into what we're doing as mentors. is we're taking the whole social emotional front and we're flipping it on its head. Okay, the mental health industry is $1 billion business. If it's so big, how come it's still not working? You know, so what I'm going to do is we're going to flip it on its head and we're going to say, well, what if it's actually not focusing on your challenges? What if we can actually focus on what you love to then create momentum to then tackle your challenges? Because that's where confidence comes from, right? Confidence is found in what you love, when you feel wins, when you see wins. Okay, so we're going to go to a student who's really struggling, okay? Like the younger version of Jake, like younger me, okay? And we're going to go to them and say, hey, what do you love? What gets you really excited? For me, it was model trains. I love model trains. Okay. That was my outlet. That was the thing of where I would go down in my ADHD hyperfocus. That was my world. Okay. So we would take some of these strategies and we would bond with the mentee through their experience, through what they love. And then once we create that relationship, we're then going to be able to say, hey, this is what it's like to hyperfocus. This is what it looks like. This is why you're reacting to mom when she tells you to do the dishes. This is why you're getting so frustrated. And when you're feeling that way, let's go back to what your outlet is. Because at that point, then we'll teach the communication strategies. Because to be able to advocate, you need an unbelievable amount of confidence. To put yourself out there and seek guidance and help, that takes someone who really knows themselves. So that is one of my beliefs. And I don't have data yet. We're doing research now on this. But to back up, why are all these students dropping out? I believe because a lot of them, they don't really either know themselves enough to be able to communicate their needs or just have those foundational skills to advocate. So that's a little bit of where this mentoring comes from. And we're really teaching self-advocacy, but our vessel is through mentorship. And it's a win-win for everyone across the board.
Marvelous. I really love what you're doing here, because as you mentioned, there's a lot of families that they don't have the resources, and you don't need a lot of resources. As you mentioned, you just need to help the child to find out what they love and to be able to develop that self-confidence and be able to communicate their needs.
Right.
And once you do that, and once they see a good path for them, like I say, our superpower is grit and determination.
Don, I absolutely. I mean, I tell a lot of parents this, is that the value of the dollar spent through having a mentor in general, forget superpower for a minute, but just the value of the dollar spent having a mentor goes so much farther. We've worked with over 95 kids from around the world since last year. The number one feedback that we've gotten is that my child has gotten more out of their mentor than any professional they've ever worked with. Okay. The answer is, how is that possible? Because these are 20-year-olds, college students. How come they're getting more out of their mentor than any professional? The real answer there is that we've been there. I know what they're thinking 5 steps before they're probably even thinking it, because I was already in their shoes. Right. So that value of the dollar spent is this. Okay. You have your tutor and you have the psychologist that you're working with. Right. So we create the willingness to learn for the tutor and for school. And we also teach the advocacy skills to communicate your needs to the therapist that you're talking to be able to then create this communication channel for the whole family. For the whole family, but also for yourself. Yeah.
Very good. Well, Jake, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
My pleasure.
So you can click on the link in the YouTube description below to learn more about Jake and Superpower Consulting. Thanks again, Jake.
Thanks, Don. Appreciate it.